In this video, we're gonna conclude our video course dedicated to 3D character design. We went through the different parts of the character, and in the previous video, we concentrated on the hair and the groom, and we created some examples of long hair or short hair. And here you can see I continue. And what I usually do working with hairs, because these are really heavy objects, I try to separate different parts, or you can create like different layers, and then you can activate and deactivate the different layers, the different elements of the hair. You can see I've also added some eyelashes. So what I've done is I've isolated the eyelids and then create a few hairs for the eyelashes, and then also the eyebrows. I did the same thing. So if you want to use the new tool of Air and Groom, you can use the add. But when you have like complex geometry, this is going to be a little bit more difficult. So I usually create some face sets, like for the bird and for the eyebrows and the rest, and then I reduce the number of polygons on those extracted parts. And this is a similar process like we did in the creating the armor and fabrics and different apparel. So I usually separate everything so I can handle and manage everything singularly like this. I can turn off and on in the visualization, and I can also decide if I want to keep some parts and I want to get rid of the others. So dividing different elements is more manageable than using like face sets or weight paints, and using also different areas but on the same exact body, even though you can separate using different hair simulation. So we talked about hair in the previous video. This is just kind of a recap to show you how I refined a little bit the groom, and I combed the different parts, and again I created kind of a makeup also using the paint. So you can place the hair on top of a paint area, so you can, like in the cinema, in the movies, and in TV series, you can create a little bit of makeup if you want to enhance some parts. And again, you can use cavities, you can use the other painting techniques and tools that we saw previously in the painting part. Now you can see here, this is the simulation. So remember always that you may want to turn off the emitter. Right now I want to turn on the emitter so that I can show you by isolating the eyelids part. So I can show you the eyelashes. So you can see it, that these are really few hairs that I placed there using the add, and there you go. So I've added also the material for the hairs, and then adjusted, just as we saw again in the previous lesson. So you can see here some example of the face sets that I've used. So I painted some face sets for the eyebrows, for the eyelids, and for the bird, and then extracted those again. Decimate, so reduce the number of polygons. You can reduce the number of polygons however you want, and this is going to optimize your model. And you can see in the body here, we still have a lot of polygons. So what we're going to talk about here, you can simplify the number of polygons with the simplify brush, and you can simplify using Retopo, Remesh. We saw all the different techniques previously. Now, this is good if you want to do, for example, Vertex paint, but it's not good when you need to do some optimized model, some low poly model that perhaps you want to use for animation, for video game, for a lot of reason. So usually you can create your character and do character design with a high number of polygons to study all the different parts and also all the different details. But then you need to go down to a low poly object when you need to export, when you need to move, for example, in Unreal Engine for video game, or you want to do animation and other stuff. You want to rig the model, you want to pose the model, and you want to create some professional texture. You need a lower number of polygons. You need also to unwrap your object. You can see right now we never actually unwrapped this body model, so we don't see any island here, any mapping in the UV editing. We can go in the UV editing. So as we saw before, we need UV editing to do a lot of things like texture paint, so we can create some details not in the model but on the texture doing like fake 3D. Now the good news is that we can bake the high details that we sculpted into a low poly using textures, and I'm going to show you that later. But first of all, if you want to do some mapping, you need to reduce the count of the polygons. Otherwise, it will be really difficult. So we're going to go through all these steps. We're going to finalize, we're going to optimize, we're going to reduce the number of polygons, we're going to create a low poly model out of this high poly model, and then we will see how we can work with textures, how we can do texture paint, how we can do unwrapping, because you can see here that in the UV editing, the map are all wrong. So the UV editing, the UV map shouldn't contain overlapping faces. But right now, probably everything is overlapped. This is because we use Retopo, we use Remesh, we use a lot of tools that don't really get along with the topology of and a correct placement of the polygons. So if we want to do animation, if you want to do a video game, if you want to do like more advanced things with the low poly mesh, we cannot use this really high poly and also that triangulated topology. So we need to retopologize, we need to retopo, we need to create a new topology out of this one here, which is too complex. Now, before we move on, I actually want to show you here from BlenderKit, because we installed BlenderKit. It's a really interesting add-on that you can use, and there is a lot of free stuff that you can go and use. For example, a lot of alpha brushes here, or depth brushes that can help you to add a lot of details. So before we're gonna move and see how we can create a low poly, high poly version of the character, I'm also gonna use a little bit of this to add some details and to show you how you can transfer 3D sculpted details into 2D normal texture. So we're gonna create like a fake 3D effect that is gonna be not heavy as sculpting. Now, for example, if I wanna create a scar here using this brush, you need to click on the brush you wanna use inside of BlenderKit, and that's gonna be then loaded into the standard brush. You can see there now the scar brush has been loaded, so I can click and drag, and probably it's using the anchored feature. So I can click and drag, and it's gonna place that detail right there. But I can add a lot of details using the brushes here, the sculpting brushes in BlenderKit. For example, I can simulate hair and fur again. So if I don't want to create hairs because they are too heavy, and also probably cannot be used in a video game, for example, because they're too heavy, well, I can simulate hair. We saw we can basically sculpt hairs on the character, and then of course we need to paint on those to make them look more realistic, like we did with the eyebrows. Essentially right here, you see that I just hide the hair, but the eyebrows are still there because those are actually sculpted and painted. So how we can transfer all these details in a low poly version of our model, we're gonna see this next. So I just want to show you this other really interesting feature about BlenderKit. Now let's get into the action. So I'm gonna use face sets again, because first I want to show you how you can pose this high poly model. But I also want to tell you right away that it's better to pose a low poly model rather than a high poly model. But essentially what we can do is isolate the part that we want to pose, and we can do that by using the face sets or the mask. And then we use the pose tool. I usually use the pose and scale and transfer, so you can like transpose